For nearly 5 years, the bright red 1966 Ford Mustang sat beneath a custom-made cover inside a climate-controlled garage. Its paint still gleamed. Its chrome sparkled under the lights. Its leather seats looked almost untouched. To anyone walking into the garage, the car appeared perfect. But there was one heartbreaking problem. It had never started again after its owner's death. The Mustang had belonged to Richard Bennett, a respected engineer who spent 30 years restoring the car with his own hands. Every bolt, every wire, every polished detail reflected his patience and craftsmanship. When Richard passed away unexpectedly, he left the Mustang to his only daughter, Victoria Bennett. Victoria had become a successful entrepreneur, building a technology company worth hundreds of millions of dollars. She could afford almost anything. Yet there was one thing money couldn't buy: hearing her father's favorite car run one more time. She tried everything. The nation's most respected restoration garages inspected the vehicle. Award-winning mechanics replaced ignition systems. Collectors searched for rare original parts. Historic automobile specialists flew in from overseas. Every expert reached the same conclusion: the engine should run. But it doesn't. The mystery became famous among classic car enthusiasts. Automotive magazines wrote articles about the silent Mustang. Online videos discussing the failed restoration collected millions of views. Finally, hoping fresh eyes might solve the mystery, Victoria made an extraordinary announcement. At the National Classic Auto Festival, she stood before reporters beside her father's Mustang. Holding back emotion, she addressed the crowd. "My father loved this car more than almost anything. I would give anything to hear it start again." She paused. "So today, I am offering a reward of $500,000 to anyone who can repair it." The announcement spread across the country within hours. Professional mechanics arrived from every state. Retired racing engineers volunteered their expertise. Collectors offered rare replacement parts free of charge. For 3 straight days, the festival became the center of the automotive world. One after another, experienced mechanics examined the Mustang. Fuel system, electrical wiring, timing, compression, carburetor, valve train, every possible diagnosis. Every attempt ended exactly the same. The starter motor turned. The engine refused to come alive. Late on the 3rd afternoon, most of the crowd had already accepted defeat. Near the edge of the exhibition grounds stood Daniel Carter with his 10-year-old daughter, Lily. Daniel owned a tiny neighborhood repair garage on the outskirts of town. It wasn't famous. Its sign was faded. Its waiting room held only 4 chairs. But families trusted Daniel because he believed every repair deserved patience. Since losing his wife 6 years earlier, he had balanced raising Lily with keeping the little garage open. Money was often tight. Some months he barely broke even. Yet he never overcharged customers. "If a repair only takes 5 minutes," he often said, "people shouldn't pay for 5 hours." Lily loved spending weekends at the garage. She handed her father tools, organized spare parts, asked endless questions about engines. As they wandered through the festival, she stopped in front of the silent Mustang. "Dad, it's beautiful." Daniel smiled. "It is. Why won't it run?" "I don't know. Yet." Lily noticed the familiar expression on his face. The one he always wore when solving difficult problems. "You want to look, don't you?" Daniel laughed quietly. "Maybe just for a minute." They walked closer. A security guard politely stepped forward. "Sorry. Only registered mechanics beyond this point." Victoria overheard the conversation. She glanced toward Daniel's worn work boots, oil-stained hands, and faded garage shirt. "You own a repair shop?" Daniel nodded. "A small one." She smiled politely. "You're welcome to have a look. I've already seen experts from around the world try. I don't expect miracles." Daniel replied with quiet humility. "Neither do I. I just like to listen." Several experienced mechanics nearby exchanged amused looks. One whispered. Another dreamer. Another chuckled. $500,000 makes everyone think they're a genius. Daniel ignored the comments. He slowly walked around the Mustang once. Then again. He never reached for a wrench. Never opened a toolbox. He simply observed every detail, listening carefully as one technician briefly turned the ignition. After only a few seconds, Daniel smiled very slightly. Victoria noticed. "You heard something?" Daniel nodded. "I think I did." The crowd grew quiet as the ordinary single dad mechanic looked toward the open engine bay and softly said, "I don't think your father left this problem by accident." The crowd immediately grew silent. Victoria looked at Daniel in confusion. What do you mean? Daniel smiled gently. I don't think your father created the problem on purpose. I think he left clues. Several veteran mechanics exchanged skeptical glances. One folded his arms. Clues. Daniel nodded. Every mechanic develops habits. The way they organize tools. The way they tighten bolts. The way they mark parts. If someone spends decades working on one car, those habits become a language. He carefully leaned over the engine compartment without removing a single part. Then he noticed a tiny scratch near one mounting bracket. Not damage. A deliberate mark. He looked toward Victoria. Did your father keep notes? She thought for a moment. He wrote everything down. He filled dozens of notebooks. Do you still have them? They're at home. Daniel smiled. I think we should start there. The next morning, Victoria invited Daniel and Lily to her father's old workshop. Shelves filled with worn notebooks lined one wall. Richard Bennett had recorded nearly every repair he ever performed. Page after page contained sketches, measurements, maintenance dates, and little reminders written in neat handwriting. Daniel spent hours reading instead of turning wrenches. Lily sat beside him organizing the notebooks by year. Suddenly Daniel stopped. I think I found something. Victoria hurried over. Near the bottom of one page, Richard had written, "The answer is always where people stop looking." Next to the sentence was a small drawing of the engine with one tiny component circled. Daniel compared the sketch to the actual car. He smiled. I think your father was reminding himself to inspect this area more carefully. With Victoria's permission, Daniel and one of the restoration specialists carefully examined the component. They discovered that although it had been replaced years earlier during one of the restorations, it had never been adjusted exactly as Richard's notes described. It wasn't defective. It simply needed precise calibration to match the engine's original setup. The restoration team made the adjustment while Daniel quietly observed. No shortcuts. No guesses. Only careful work. When everything was ready, Victoria looked at Daniel. You should start it. Daniel shook his head. No. This moment belongs to you. With trembling hands, Victoria sat behind the wheel. She took a deep breath. Then she turned the key. The starter turned once. Twice. Then the Mustang roared to life with the unmistakable sound of a healthy V8 engine. For a moment, nobody moved. Then cheers erupted throughout the workshop. Several mechanics applauded. Others smiled and congratulated one another. Victoria stepped out of the car with tears in her eyes. It sounds exactly like I remember. She hugged Daniel tightly. Thank you. Daniel smiled. I think your father deserves most of the credit. He left the roadmap. I simply helped read it. That afternoon, Victoria carried a certified check to Daniel. $500,000. It's yours. Daniel looked at it for a long moment. Then he smiled and slid it back across the table. I can't accept it. Victoria looked stunned. You earned it. Daniel shook his head. I didn't come here for money. He reached into his pocket and placed $15 on the table. I only need this. Victoria looked confused. What is that for? Daniel laughed softly. My garage charges $15 for a diagnostic inspection. I looked. I diagnosed the problem. The repair was completed by your restoration team. So $15 is the fair price. The room fell silent. One of the mechanics whispered, I've never seen anything like that. Victoria smiled through her tears. You really mean it. Daniel nodded. My daughter watches everything I do. I want her to learn that doing the right thing is worth more than chasing the biggest paycheck. Lily smiled proudly. My dad always says, if people trust your honesty, they'll never forget your work. Victoria didn't argue. Instead, she created the Richard Bennett Restoration Scholarship, helping young mechanics learn the craft of restoring classic cars. She asked Daniel to serve as its first instructor. He accepted, not for the recognition, but because he enjoyed teaching. Years later, when students asked Daniel about the famous $500,000 reward, he always smiled. I didn't refuse $500,000. I accepted something much more valuable. What was it, they would ask? The chance to honor a father's legacy. People remembered the story because a millionaire offered $500,000 to fix her late father's car, and a single dad mechanic asked for only $15. But those who knew the full story understood that the greatest reward wasn't money. It was hearing a cherished family memory come back to life, and proving that true craftsmanship is guided not only by skill, but by fairness, humility, and respect for the people who came before us.